Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. So glad you could join us on a Thursday. And the guy we have with us on the line right now, I've been wanting actually to speak with him for a long time. Of course you know him on Fox News. He is a very familiar face. He's the co-host of Fox and Friends. He's got a new book out called Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, the Texas Victory That Changed American History. And it's always a pleasure to steal a few of his listeners because he's on before us, and he does a fantastic job, so we certainly have to thank him for that. Brian Kilmeade joining us right now on the line. Brian, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
It's an honor to be your lead-in. How are things in Vegas?
Things are good, man. We missed you. You did your show out here not that long ago, I heard.
Well, I think the last time we were out there were the debates.
Right.
So I don't think I would definitely come. Oh, yeah, actually, I'm wrong. I did come out, and I did go to the performance studio right after and did meet a lot of your great listeners. And I did go through your stuff, and most of your valuables are now with me.
Well, you wouldn't have much. I don't own much. As you know, radio, when you first get your start, it doesn't pay very well. So I don't have that many valuables, Brian. But there's a lot, there's a lot I want to get to with you, Brian, in a short period of time. Let's start with this. We've talked a little bit about Hillary Clinton today. We haven't really spoken about her in a while. And a lot of speculation whether she will run for president, whether she won't. What did you make of her interview on the Howard Stern show? Because I think she should have done that interview 3 years ago.
I'll put it this way. I only heard excerpts of it. I'm a huge Howard Stern fan, probably the biggest. And from day one, even when he comes after me, which he did a couple of times.
Did he really?
But yeah, I forgot what it was. But I just think he's fantastic. But with Howard Stern, with the last time I saw Howard Stern, he is a guy that likes Donald Trump. And his interviews, the interviews he did with Howard Stern really haunted him because Donald Trump is honest. And they're talking about women, and he's talking about dating, and when he's in between wives. They did 25 years of interviews. And he always liked Trump, but he says, I never thought he should be president.
Right.
And then he seems to have gone a little bit to the left these days, Howard Stern, because his best friend's Jimmy Kimmel, and we know where he is.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Since you're a big Howard guy like myself, I didn't know that about you. See, Howard, he's been friends with Trump over the years, and Howard's take on Trump has always been, look, why did you want to run for president? You have a nice family. You have all the money in the world. You're in your golden years. Why did you want this stress? And I kind of agree with Howard. Do you kind of agree with that?
Well, I understand his perspective, but Trump has been talking about running for president since the 80s. I mean, Phil Donahue was the first one to ask him. I don't know how many of our listeners actually remember who Phil Donahue was. He had the whole format before Oprah got it.
Right.
So he was on there, and they were talking about, this whiz kid. And remember shaking the hands of Richard Nixon, and Nixon being impressed with him, and going to the White House. So he's been every time he gets in goes to promote a fight or the USFL, he was still talking about running for president. So it's one of those things that was just out there for him. It's like Howard Stern, for example, if he always said, I want to be a TV star and have a talk show, and at 60-something years old, he finally gets a late-night talk show. You're like, why do it? It's one of those things that was out there for him, and I do think he planned on winning, and I do think he was a better candidate. And evidently Hillary Clinton was very open and honest when she was and likable talking to Howard Stern.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you think that Hillary Clinton going on the Howard Stern show is indicative that she may be looking to run for the presidency in 2020?
I don't know. A lot of her people, just three of her main people, or three other people, Obama people that would have been with her, just went to Pete Buttigieg today, matter of fact.
Wow.
So until I hear her assembling a staff,
right.
I don't really think that's it. But I will say this. If I'm a Democrat, I mean, the reason why Bloomberg and Deval Patrick jumped in is because there's just nobody breaking through.
Yeah, I agree.
And not only that, even if you had the next coming of Barack Obama, everything's about Trump and everything's about impeachment.
You're right.
So you can't even get your head above water at a time in which the whole country should be focusing on you. You don't even have the Iowa caucus yet. Nobody seems to care about these people. Yeah. So if in the back of her mind she thinks she can run, she should, but I think she's too old. I think she's not physically in great shape. And I actually think that she has Trump derangement syndrome. She's obsessed with the fact that she lost and won't accept it. The other day she goes, I'll beat him again. You'll beat him again.
Well,
what don't you understand about 300 electoral votes?
Yeah, obviously, she didn't win the electoral vote. She won the popular vote, as you know, but you're certainly right about that. I mean, look, let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump, if I may, because you've interviewed Donald Trump a number of times, particularly on Fox and Friends. And I think you do as good a job as you guys can. Am I wrong to say this, Brian, that I think Trump is one of the most difficult people to interview? Because it appears there are times where you're trying to get a word in edgewise and you're trying to ask a question and he mumbles. And I see this look on your face, Brian, and I don't want to assume things because you've always been respectful to the president. And I would as well if I had a chance to interview him. But it just seems to me that at times you guys get a little frustrated when you're interviewing him.
Well, you got to keep it understanding. Like, no president ever calls in. He's actually calling in on the phone. So instead of me looking at him one-on-one, it's 1-on-3, and we're on the couch, and everyone's staring at us.
Right.
And a full screen that says Trump. But, there's a couple of things. When you interview the president, you got to let him finish. But yet, if you let him finish, you only get 3 questions in.
Right.
And if you remember that when Brett Baer interviewed when Chris Wallace interviewed Bill Clinton, when Brett Baer interviewed Mitt Romney, wasn't a president but was running for president, and then when Bill O'Reilly interviewed Barack Obama, they all said the same thing. Why do you keep interrupting me? It's like, well, I'm trying to get a word in.
Right.
And the thing is, you get people that are going to be ticked off. I got a lot of that. Wow, why are you interrupting? I'm like, really? I'm like,
you have to.
I owe it to the audience to get something new out.
You have to interview him. Otherwise, he's going to keep going. If you're just joining us, Brian Kilmeade, his new book, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, also does a great show that we air here every morning. It is the Brian Kilmeade Show. Brian Kilmeade is joining us on the line. All right, let's talk a little bit about media bias, then I want to get to your book. So here's what I do, Brian. I watch Fox News. I do. And I watch CNN. I feel like I get 2 sides to the story. I believe CNN leans to the left after 5 p.m., and I believe Fox News leans to the right. I think that's a very fair statement to make. And then I draw my own conclusions. Do you think it's dangerous? And I'm not trying to say, well, people need to have to watch both sides, but do you think it's dangerous if people just watches one network or just the other network, and that's how they form their opinions?
Well, a couple of things. If you said to me 4 years ago, I'd say I absolutely flip around. I mean, I went out of my way to flip around. Even if I wanted to watch Hannity, I go, no, you know what? I got to flip. I got to get another perspective because I'm doing the radio show and Fox and Friends. So if I can't, I always like to pull sound from other shows.
Right.
So I got to kind of watch. But now I don't because there's one note. And you said for CNN's only bias after 5 p.m. Alison Camerata is one of my best friends in television. She's one of the best hosts I could ever host with. Mm-hmm. But they have never said anything positive against the president for 3 years. That's not possible. I mean, it's not possible. He's done nothing right. And you literally, I don't think you can keep employed there if Jeff Zucker would keep you employed if you said anything positive about the president.
Well, it's a fair point that Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer do lean to the left. There's absolutely no question about it. And look, there's a lot.
Brian, they live on
they
the
do.
left. They live there.
I've always liked Wallace and Shepard Smith for just giving out the news. They're not really, and I know Shepard left with you guys, but Brett Baer is another guy that I would say I have tremendous amount of respect for. And then but you're right. Look, CNN leans way to the left. I'm not going to deny that. There's no question about it.
It never used to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's no question about that. I certainly don't disagree with you. Hey, here's a really important question for you. When are we going to see Jesse Ventura back in studio with you round 2? Because I remember years ago you guys went at it, and then you, walked off the set. Do you remember that?
Well, you can appreciate this. I wasn't walking off the set. I was walking a radio.
Oh, is that what you were doing?
The show was over. So people kept saying, I walk on the set. I go, guys, I can't. I have 6 minutes to get 18 floors. That's every day.
Okay, so that's a misunderstanding then, but I love it when you go at it with people like that. I think that's great television, and you know this. It's great radio. Does he not want to go on Fox and Friends anymore, or has he come on since?
I actually, to steal a word from the president, I do think he's deranged. I think there's something absolutely mentally wrong with him.
Yeah.
I think he's nuts. I think whether it's the steroids he was taking, but he's not worth to keep booking. I'm telling you right now, if he comes in and shows, I want to come on the show, don't book him. He's out of reality. He's out surfing in Mexico somewhere. So he's not a guy I'm looking to book again.
Who is the weirdest, strangest interview you've ever done in your career? And also name me one person that you've always wanted to interview that has never done it.
I've interviewed Bill Clinton out, and that's when he was at his zenith, most popular after he was done. I interviewed him at the Super Bowl. But I also interviewed him right after 9/11. He stopped, and for some reason he walked to my camera. But I always wanted to get him in studio. Now he's such a diminished figure. That used to be it. I mean, I really got to think about that. Actually, I would love to catch up to a guy that I used to love, Sting. I used to thought he was, as a musician, I thought he was great. He's got this global concept. I thought it was fantastic. and I'm looking for a sequel with him. And I was willing to even meet him on 57th Street, which is the name of his last album, and he still wouldn't do it because we're Fox.
Oh, geez.
So that gets kind of.
Don't you think more?
I did Letterman on radio. I'd love to do Letterman again.
I want to talk to you about.
There's that Fox thing again.
I want to talk to you about your book, but I just one more follow up to what you just said. Don't you think more Democrats? I've said this all along. More Democrats need to go on Fox News, just like I would say more people on the right need to go on MSNBC and CNN.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better for Democrats to do your show, to do Sean Hannity, to do shows like that, and get a little bit out of your comfort zone, and maybe? Worst case scenario, maybe you might turn a few Republicans. I mean, I don't understand why more Democrats won't do your show.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I know Chris Coons comes on all the time. Swalwell came on all the time. I know when I fill in for Tucker, he always tries to book Democrats. I think it would make sense. What I think is going to happen, and you've heard me say this on the show, is that I believe after this election, it's going to be first. I think it's going to be immigration. Something's going to break, and we're going to do this horrible thing, compromise. And then they're going to look at health care, and they're going to say both parties are going to set up a working group. We're going to get a study in 6 months, and we're going to sign off on it. And sooner or later, that'll help from the top down relax everybody and cut the tension a little bit and start seeing everybody's other side. But when you decide to impeach a president on this phone call, and when you see that Jonathan Turley, who didn't vote for him and hasn't voted for a Republican, it doesn't seem for about 20 years, when he breaks down as a constitutional attorney how out of your minds you have to be to make this impeachable, then you understand that things are only going to get worse. Things are going to get really bad. The election is 9 months away, 10 months away, and now you're going to see the anger just hit all-time highs. Because now one Republican is crossed and about a handful of Democrats will cross. And when Nancy Pelosi has a press conference like she just had, how dare you say I hate, as if that's someone asked the question, do you hate the president? Which is a quote from Doug Collins, and she snaps. Then she says, I have no choice but to go forward with this. There is beyond dispute the president abused his office. Of course there's a dispute. We watched 3 weeks of a dispute. Mm-hmm. You could say, in my view, or in our view, the president abused his office. But when you sit there and put words in people's mouth, it drives them nuts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one thing I don't understand, we were just talking about networks, but I would probably say that 60 to 70% of CNN's content right now revolves around Donald Trump. Why, if that's the case, and that's where obviously when all your content is revolves around one person, and obviously you have ratings and advertisers and sponsor dollars, et cetera, why are they hoping that he is no longer the president of the United States? Because their ratings will just plummet. Why are they trying to shoot themselves in the foot? I don't understand that.
And people buying New York Times again, Washington Post again, because the president keeps talking about him. He's been great for everybody's business. He really has. But the problem is the media has not given him a fair shot, and he's his worst enemy when it comes to the media. He does provocative things. He never should say enemy of the people and point up there. Mm-hmm. Never was for that, ever. But the fact is, today they write this story in Axios, best example. They write, for the first 2 years, the president done thing in manufacturing that really reversed and delivered for blue-collar workers. But over the last year, due to the China trade loggerheads that were out in the tariffs, things have really slowed down, taking that narrative away from the president. I go, wait a second. So you're actually giving him credit after 3 years for bringing manufacturing back, something you denied, in order to say it's now down, so it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Listen, we all know that there's a lot of bias in the media. And listen, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I love talking to people like you, and I love talking to Trump supporters that are reasonable Republicans. So I guess that would be my next question. I believe there are many reasonable Republicans out there that say, look, what the president did in this phone call with the Ukrainian president, at the very least, I wouldn't have done it. It was wrong. It was probably beneath the presidency. He shouldn't have done it, but I'm not so sure. But I'm not so sure it's an impeachable offense. And I think that is a reasonable position, Brian. I really do. But I think what's not reasonable are the people on the right that echo the president's remarks that this phone call was a quote-unquote perfect phone call, and some of those people that are attacking Vindman, a war hero, those are the people that I call unreasonable Republicans. Do you think that's fair?
I mean, if you attack Vindman for his fighting, that's ridiculous. If you say that you didn't deserve the Purple Heart or whatever he got,
right.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. But if Vindman's going to come out there and have an opinion, and he said, I don't think you should ever do this for a political opponent, those are parroting like Adam Schiff's words. And the other thing is, he did have a proclivity towards the Ukraine. And if those people who say you never should criticize anyone in uniform, please keep that in mind when it comes to Michael Flynn.
Right.
Please keep that in mind
that's
when
fair.
it comes to John McCain.
Yeah, that's fair.
John McCain was ripped every day on the late night shows on down. They're like,
he was.
Well, he's a war hero. By the president of the United States called him, I like people that don't get captured.
Sure.
But, it's ridiculous. But either hands off because you fought war, but back in a different era, 7 out of every 10 men were actually war veterans. Now it's 1 out of, 5,000 or 20,000.
Sure.
So I love people that have respect. I love, there's a lot of people in jail right now that were great Marines, and they did some horrible things. There was a guy that just shot up on the docks in Virginia Beach, in Hawaii. Evidently, he got a great service record, but he just shot 3 people and then killed himself on December 7th, and just shot him yesterday. Yeah. So, there's got to be a degree. I want to respect the uniform, but it doesn't mean you got to respect everything they say. And Vindman felt like he had to stand up. There's a problem with this whole whistleblower, that whole cabal, how that all came out, and why they're trying to hide him now because he's so politically oriented. And I say this, if someone's on the record disliking me, and there's plenty there are, and they have a problem with me legally, I would at least like to know if that person has already had an axe to grind with me and my accuser. And I think you should come out. Well, if you want to,
I think that's fair. No doubt. I think that's fair.
If you Google me, and I've said this before, if you Google me, you look at the president tweeted against me, tell him how wrong I am to criticize him on Syria, the pullout. Yeah. How wrong I was to say that Megyn Kelly had good ratings. How wrong I was when I said George Bush did not know about weapons of mass destruction ahead of time. I knew that was absolutely the case. Right. So, how wrong it was to interview, to ridicule a already dead John McCain. I've already said this.
And I respect that.
He doesn't like it. Because I don't have, my compliments mean nothing if everything he does I say is right. That means everything
it's called credibility.
Should be thrown in the crease.
It's called credibility, and that's why we appreciate what you do. Okay, last question for you, Brian. You're a pretty busy guy doing TV and radio. I want to give you a chance to talk about your book, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, the Texas victory that changed American history. Talk to me a little bit about this book, why you decided to write it, and give people a rundown on why they should go pick it up.
Well, here's the thing. The other 49 states, including Nevada, doesn't really understand this story like Texans do, and I always thought, well, that's their story, until Fox Nation asked me to go cover the Alamo. And they asked me to do a 30-minute mini documentary on it, and I talked to all these people, and they would say to me, Brian, this is only a small part of the story. The Texas Revolution, you got to do the Texas Revolution. And I said, okay. And then I sat down with Doug Brinkley. And then, believe it or not, I'm not name-dropping, but Ken Burns came in the studio, and he goes, what are you working on? I go, I really don't know. And he says, well, where are you going? I go, well, I'm going to San Antonio to do the Alamo. He goes, well, do San Jacinto. That's your book, Alamo to San Jacinto. And I said, you mean the victory? At the end, he goes, no. What happened there is people aren't going to believe it. It's not well chronicled. You got to do it. So I said, what if I told you a book? I wrote a book. They told you how Texas got populated with Americans, what caused them to rise up, why the Alamo matters so much, why Goliad was even more of a massacre, and how Sam Houston led the most unfathomable victory, you could argue, even though technically not America, but American-fought victory maybe in our history, just 60 years after our first revolution. And all we were doing was a bunch of put-together hodgepodge of soldiers with a lot of courage, willing to fight to the death. And they came together and struck at the perfect time to wipe out a standing Mexican army and capture Santa Ana. And I thought if I could talk about the Texas Revolution that changed American history, that people would care. And thankfully it's come off, and it's still on the bestseller list. We're 4 weeks in.
That's awesome.
It's number 3 in the country. And I think that we find out that our listeners are into politics and they love the country. They know we're not perfect in our past, but they want to embrace our past. And if I could tell them or reignite some passion they had in history, and I write for the everyman, I have no interest in impressing the Harvard professor. That's impossible. So I thought if I could write for the masses, that there might be people that are interested.
Well, Brian, you're right. People do care, and it shows with the selling of your book, and congratulations on all your success. We're really happy to have you here doing the morning show at KDWN. We're happy to do the show after yours. You're a class act and one of the most successful guys in the business. We have a lot of respect for you, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us. We hope we could have you on again sometime.
That would be great, and I look forward to talking to you guys again. I promise to make sure you're in studio when I go in studio next time.
We would love to meet you in person, Brian. Thanks again for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
Go get him, guys.
All right, thanks very much.
Brian.
There you go, Brian Kilmeade joining us, co-host of Fox and Friends. Good guy. And it's so interesting because when you have I did the same thing with Mark Levin, okay? And by the way, I think Mark Levin is way further to the right than Brian Kilmeade. I'll explain what that means coming up next. But Brian Kilmeade sounds to me like a pretty reasonable guy.
He's extremely reasonable. I actually had someone message me on Facebook say, I hope Brian doesn't go off the rails on Brian Kilmeade.
No, I would never do that.
I said there is a difference between guests and callers, my friend.
No question. Your reaction to that Brian Kilmeade interview, we'll talk about that when we come back. And what are some of Donald Trump's, I guess you could say, behaviors, a maid that used to pick up after Donald Trump talking about that? We'll get to that next, coming up next on the Vegas Take.